So yeah, welcome back everybody. So after a very, very thorough introduction to the legislative process at European level, I think you've really you will go away and you will definitely obviously need all of those slides to be able to refer back to. You have a really deep insight there into the way in which this process works, including some insights that you will not find in the textbooks to understand that what are the right points in time at which to intervene in the process and so forth. And that's really where we're going to go into it a bit more detail now, focusing on uh, disability rights, on the subject matter that is most of interest to us, with Alejandro Moledo, who is the executive director the deputy director
Def-
of, I've just promoted you,
Thank you for the promotion.
of the European Disability Forum. Um, for those of you who participated in the Vote4All project last year, you will remember Alejandro from our first webinar of that series, talking about the different barriers to the right to vote in the European Union. And those of us who were lucky enough to participate in the study visit to Brussels last July met with Alejandro in person. And thank you for your contributions to that project. So now we're going to look into entry points for advocacy at EU level in terms of from the perspective of the European Disability Forum. Alejandro, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John, and great to be here. Actually, I was on the phone with our executive director, Catherine Naughton, and she told me to say hi to you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, as I said, thank you so much for organizing this training. I was listening to Gabriel's presentation, and indeed, it was very, very thorough and super comprehensive. So there is a lot to digest there. So I discussed with him a little bit before, and we agreed that I would just focus on the specific disability-related entry points for our advocacy. So I prepared a presentation which, I mean, refers to some of the concepts and learnings that Gabriel highlighted in his sessions. But I tried to make it practical, so to give you tips and ideas and how to do the advocacy, and particularly when it comes to disability rights. I hope that's useful, and I really hope that I can do it in such a way that we have time for questions, which at the end of the day is also a nice part of this kind of trainings, right? So just bear with me a moment. I will try to share my screen. Just a second, because I'm the kind of person that has 1,000 apps open. Well, not 1,000, but many. And yeah, this one it is. Okay, can you see? I cannot see, so I don't know if you can
Just
see.
starting, I think.
It's charting, no? Wait.
It's if we can see it in the background.
You should be able. Oh, what is this?
Retry setting Acrobat Reader default
As your
PDF.
default. What is this? Not now. Okay,
There.
now you see it.
Yes. Now we see
You
it
see?
clear.
Okay, good. And this, I do it like this to have full screen.
Great.
Good. So we can start. Very good. Should I place this here? Okay. So yeah, again, thank you so much for the invitation. And as I said, I want to focus on different tips and strategy tactics that you can use to promote disability rights. So I will start by just a little bit of a recap of what Gabriel mentioned, some of the basics that, well, he went farther than the basics. So concerning the EU policy making, I think one element that he stressed in his presentation was the division of competence, which is a kind of like a tough area to grasp, like what is an exclusive competence of the European Union, what are the shared competencies, what competencies the EU is just in principle supporting member states. And this is important to know, this is important to look at before doing an advocacy campaign, because you can already foresee what kind of level of interest or influence as well that the EU could have. And I say that because for disability organizations like ours, many times most of the most pressing issues that we persons with disabilities face in our everyday life, in many cases, these have to do with national, sometimes even local and regional competence, which doesn't mean that the EU cannot do or is not supposed to do anything about it. Let's remember that the EU, as a supranational organization, and all member states, they have ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD, which, as Gabriel explained, is right after the EU treaties. So it's part of our legal framework, universally ratified. So not only by the member states individually, but also as the EU as a supranational organization. Therefore, they all have a collective obligation to implement the convention, regardless of how they divide the competences. So in the slides that I will send to John so he can distribute, you'll have all the links. There is an easy kind of list of the division of competencies that you can check. And sometimes for disability rights, we even had some important wins in areas that you could think, okay, this doesn't have anything to do with disability or with people with disabilities, like internal market, the EU internal market, which sounds so like economics and for businesses and so forth. With thanks that the EU has a shared competence in the EU internal market, we have now important legislation for people with disabilities, such as the European Accessibility Act, for example. Or thanks to the EU shared competence when it comes to transport, particularly long distance transport, obviously not the urban transport, we have passengers' rights in different modes of transport. So even if we see that, okay, employment policies, education, they are very much a national competence, the EU has a shared competence in certain areas and a supporting role in ensuring what the EU calls harmonization. So trying, to ensure that all countries go into in a coherent direction. In the case of persons with disabilities, this should be and must be the CRPD. So this is important to know to plan your advocacy, but it shouldn't be a constraint. Because as we all know well as well, and I will finish with this, the division of competence sometimes is flexible as well, because health is a very much national competence, but we saw how during the COVID pandemic, the EU became more active on health policies. So it's also a matter of political will. There are the treaties, obviously, but it's also a matter of political will. So I will not go into the legislative procedure because Gabriel made a masterclass about it. But just to recap very quickly, that the right to initiate legislation is within the European Commission, and the ones that amend such proposal are the European Parliament and the Council, and the Council of the EU. And in this next slide, you will find resources that EDF has produced that could help you. So we do have a toolkit on how to lobby the EU from national level. So at a national level. There you will find strategies and ideas of what you can do from the member states to influence the EU. I will mention some of them today. Then I would also like to highlight a training that we organize with our members. So this is only, it's not a public training, it's a training for EDF members and the members of our members. So you should have access to it. And it's a training that we organized focused on the European Parliament. There you will have two videos apart from the presentation. In the first video, we go through the legislative procedure, the ordinary legislative procedure that Gabriel explained, step by step, a bit easier, and with an example, the example of the European Accessibility Act. So you will see the different stages that the Accessibility Act took in order to be adopted through the European Parliament. So all the different moments in which we reach out to the rapporteur and shadow rapporteurs, we prepare amendments, we distribute those proposals for amendments, then the MEPs took them into consideration, they table the amendments, then we recommend to vote for the amendments that are favorable for our objectives and so forth. So you will see. And then the second video, which is also very, very nice to watch, is an interview with one parliamentary assistant of an MEP, of a member of the European Parliament, and one policy advisor. And it's good because we ask them about practical tips and the do's and don'ts that organizations need to do when approaching MEPs, like how to approach them, how to organize an event with an MEP, the things that they appreciate and the things that they don't appreciate. And I will also mention some of this in my presentation. And lastly, even though it's not part of my presentation, and it will be something that will come later in your program for today, we also produced a toolkit about enforcement. But this I will leave to the next speaker. So here we start with the tips. The first one is very much what Gabriel also highlighted, which is to know the process. You don't need to know exactly every single step, but the overall kind of picture and where to go when is important to know. The European Commission has, we included here a link with an example of a very interesting campaign that was very successful, which is the European Disability Card that many of you will know. The Disability Card was an idea that was first thought in the Belgian national member of EDF. They had the idea of proposing to EDF to propose to the EU a European card for people with disabilities. At first, this was called the Mobility Card. This was in 2009. So the Belgian Disability Forum proposed this to EDF. EDF discussed it with all its members. We adopted a position. We kind of created the concept idea. Then we proposed to the Commission. We did communication about it. Then the Commission took it at, okay, this is interesting. Let's do a pilot project. The pilot project was a success in 8 countries. And then we kept on asking for the extension of the disability card in every opportunity we had when talking with the European Commission. So in any public consultation that the Commission launched about the disability strategies, we said, okay, we want the disability card to be a reality and more than just in 8 countries and not a pilot project, but really something established. And then the Commission took it into consideration finally, and thanks to the also success in those 8 countries, and then the card was included as a flagship initiative in the disability strategy, that the disability strategy 2021-2030, and the Commission prepared a directive, and this directive went through the legislative procedure in record time. It took like only 6 months to get this adopted. It's been, I would say, the fastest procedure that we've ever seen. And it was successful because everyone was supportive, particularly in the European Parliament, not so much in the Council. I will talk about this later. And now the directive is, it was adopted. It was published in the official journal of the EU, and now this directive needs to be incorporated in national law in all member states, which is what we call transposition. And for transposition purposes, you also have in EDF websites toolkits that we produce for important disability legislation. When there is something very important for for our community. We prepare a toolkit explaining the directive, or particularly directive, because as Gabriel explained, the regulations, they go immediately to the copy-pasted, basically, to the official journal of all member states, whereas the directives, like the European Accessibility Act, the European Disability Card, other different, well, we have many examples of directive concerning also audiovisual services or electronic communications. So these directives, the member states, they have some room for interpretation, and sometimes they are ambitious, but most of the times they are not. So that's why we produce these toolkits that you can check. So you have, for example, a toolkit about the European Disability Card. Then other useful resources that you can check for this kind of legislative process is the European Commission Have Your Say portal. Gabriel also mentioned this. This is where the Commission announces, okay, we have this initiative. This is our kind of schedule. We will publish a call for evidence and a public consultation by the second quarter of the year, and then we will prepare the proposal that will be released in the last quarter of the year. So it is important to monitor this. You can actually set some notifications for keywords, for example, or in different by different policy areas. So, for example, if you are following health policies, you can be notified if there is a public consultation about health in the Have Your Say portal. Another one that we use quite often is the Parliament's Legislative Observatory. This is particularly useful when the legislation has been already released. So the Commission Have Your Say portal is mostly useful when the Commission is preparing the legislation, and the Parliament's Legislative Observatory is useful when the legislation has been proposed. So when the Commission has finished, for the moment, their work, and they have sent the proposal to the Parliament and to the Council. In this legislative observatory of the Parliament, you can check who is the rapporteur, who are the shadow rapporteurs. So basically what Gabriel explained, those MEPs that are very much involved in the in a particular legislative file. So you see which committee is responsible for this file, in the committee which MEPs are responsible for this file, and then which other committees have an opinion, blah, blah, blah. And then another important website, which is a bit more difficult, less user-friendly, if we can call it that, is the Council document register. So here's where you can request, actually, sometimes, because not all documents are unfortunately available, the Council documents, the preparatory work of the Council position. As Gabriel said, it's sometimes very challenging to follow what's going on in the Council, but we'll get into that in a moment as well. Then, as a second tip, which I would like to stress very much, this one, because I fear that sometimes NGOs and disability organizations, we don't always adapt well our messaging, is so we need to distinguish to whom we are addressing. And sometimes we tend to be, human rights and very lengthy, and we like talking a lot about, because we are passionate about our campaigns and the cause that we are pursuing together and all that. But it's important to adapt our message to our interlocutors. And here I made the example of the Web Accessibility Directive, which was rather technical, because it was about how to make websites of the public sector accessible to people with disabilities. So it has different levels, right? You have obviously the human rights level, which is, everyone should have the right to access the public sector websites and mobile application. This is Article 9 of the Convention. This is Article 21, 30. You can go on and on with this, but then you have okay, yes, you have the right, but how we achieve this? And here when it comes technical, because you need to explain how a website can be made accessible, and then you get into the technicalities because accessibility is not so black and white. Nothing can be made totally accessible for totally everyone, and you need to talk about standards, and then it gets technical. But this happens in all policy areas. So here, what I wanted to highlight is like, depending on the interlocutor, you need to adapt the message or how you speak or how you frame your messages, depending on the details, whether they are more technical or more political, and also depending on the degree of or the level of influence of your interlocutor. So I made this kind of 1, 2, 3 division, which is very, very kind of, not so detailed. So it's something that you need to read yourself when meeting somebody, and kind of guess as well. But we can say that the highest level, the highest political level, let's say, and highest influence as well. So when you meet, imagine you meet a European commissioner, or you meet a minister of a country, or you meet, the president of the European Parliament, or the president of, or the chair of a committee in the European Parliament, then you need to be rather political. You need to talk about the human rights. You need to bring personal stories, like moving your constituency. We'll talk about this in a moment as well. You need to be, let's say, more, the activist in you, no? Then, if you go one level down, when you meet MEPs, let's say the MEPs that are involved in a particular file, so those rapporteur and shadow rapporteurs, and when you meet the commission head of unit, heads of unit, not the director general, no, of the different, let's say, ministries in the commission. No, when you talk with a commission head of unit, then you need to you are a bit in between. Okay, you need to mention these human rights issues and this political messaging, but then you need to also go into the substance as well, because you need to basically tell them as well, in practice, what do you need? Okay, do you want to remove this article in the legislation? Do you want to add a new provision? Do you want to change this one? Maybe you don't need to go into the nitty-gritty of the exact wording that you want to write, but you need to state, let's say, your objective in a more precise way, if I can say that. But then if you move down, let's say, in the degree of influence, although it's not always like that, as also Gabriel mentioned, when you meet with the assistance of MEPs, with policy advisors, with with an expert in the European Commission, a policy officer that knows his file or her file in detail, there you don't basically need to go into discussing the human rights, the convention, how important it is, the convention, and so forth. What they need is basically the data. They need the evidence, and they need, if possible, the solution that you want. So basically, you need to provide the solution. Here's when, for example, when we meet with these let's say, more technical people, including, for example, the council attaches that Gabriel was mentioning. There we come, for example, with specific proposals for amendments. So they, with the objective of them basically copy pasting them. I mean, if they copy paste our solution, then we are more than happy, obviously. And then you see that sometimes what we have discussed and what we have proposed, sometimes we see our words actually that made it to the end, and now they are published in the official journal of the EU. So this is the ultimate success. And this doesn't happen so often either, but sometimes it does happen. So the distinguishing between this kind of level of technical, political slash expertise is important when you address your interlocutors. You cannot come to meet a European commissioner or even an MEP with a list of 10 points. For example, you need to come with 3. Um, so it's important to read the situation and to whom you are meeting. So moving on, the next tip I wanted to highlight is something obvious, no? But sometimes we forget. It's like it's important to be helpful. I always like to say that it's important to be nice as well, because we sometimes are really angry because yeah, we have reasons to be very very angry. Um, so when discussing with policymakers, when you discuss with the Commission, with MEPs, and so forth, it's important to facilitate their work. So it's easy to come with a big demand or a big, idea, but yeah, if you come with that big demand and a big idea with how to achieve it, is better. It's true. It's not our work. It's not our job. It shouldn't be our job to find the solution as as representative organizations of people with disabilities. However, if you come with the solution and you kind of say, listen, and this is a concern for us, and here's how we believe you could address it. So if you come with the solution, that is also very, very helpful, because yeah, they need something or they understand a problem, and you provide how they can tackle it. Something that they appreciate very much is to be a reliable partner. So to respond quickly, to act as experts, because we, organizations of people with disabilities, we are experts in bringing the lived experiences of people with disabilities. Therefore, what they want is this. What they want is, okay, if imagine a member of the European Parliament comes to you and say, what are the barriers of people with disabilities to access employment? Then you can quickly point them out, like the barriers that from your members that are the most important, and then you can add data that the MEP can use if he or she wants to take an initiative. Like, for example, I will show you like data on Eurostat on people with disabilities. Something that also sorry, with this I wanted to say that it's important to answer quickly, but not to just send a 10 pages manifesto on the barriers to employment. In many depends on who is requesting this, but again, if it is a politician, usually they want the big picture. If there is somebody more technical, they will want all this kind of backup information, like data from Eurostat and case studies, research, etc., etc. If you are dealing with a politician, as always, as you can imagine, they also want to be recognized for their work. So, an MEP, be recognized, not recognized like, okay, flattered, but, if the MEP has been, instrumental in passing legislation, for example, thanking him or he for doing that. Organizing events with them is also something that they appreciate, because let's remember, their job is at stake every 5 years. So that's why they also want to obviously be seen by their constituencies. So and what the example I included in this slide, which I think is useful for is useful is an example on how to use these different levels, is our series human rights report. So at EDF we publish every year um, uh, a report in which we compare the situation of a particular article in the convention in the 27 member states. And there is nothing like comparing you with your neighbor. So in those reports, you have maps with colors saying, okay, in this particular article, let's say Article 29 on political participation, let's see which countries have the right to vote to all persons with disabilities and which countries they restrict this right. Let's see which countries allow to be candidates and which countries restrict this right. Or let's look at the accessibility of elections. And with that, human rights report is a lengthy report. It's a research report, but there you will find the different levels because you have the evidence, the data, these kind of maps. You have also testimonials, so bringing the personal perspective, and then you have the political parts of the forwards and also the political recommendations that we always prepare at the end of the report. So depending with whom we are talking to, these resources are useful because, okay, if it is an assistant of an MEP that needs data, or if there is a commission official that needs, I need the specific, numbers, then we can use these maps and this evidence. If there is a politician that needs, okay, I want a story that this is an issue, then we can use the testimonials. And then as advocacy organization, we use the recommendations that we provide at the end of the report, divided by, okay, these are recommendations for the EU, these are recommendations for member states. Okay, so moving on our allies, our entry points for disability and some resources as well. So here I just highlight some of them. I mean, it really depends on the policy area and it really depends on the file because, for example, even in our field, let's say, on disability rights, then you have different areas. So depending if you are talking or you're interested in the institutionalization, there is an expert group on the institutionalization. If you are interested in accessibility, there will be an expert group in the Commission about the European Accessibility Act. So it really depends on the policy area. But let's say for general disability rights matter, I think our allies in the commission, our main allies, are within the disability unit, which are now in DG Just. I think Gabriel mentioned DG Employment, but they have moved since the beginning of this Monday. They were in DG Employment and Social Affairs for 2 mandates, but this one, after the 2024 European elections, they moved to DG Just. So for general matters concerning disability, for anything related to the disability strategy and actions such as the Accessibility Act or the disability card, so things that are related to, let's say, disability specific or the CRPD, you can reach out to the disability unit. The disability unit, because of the disability strategy, they created the disability platform, which is an expert group in which you have the CRPD focal points, the EU focal point, which is this unit in the Commission, and the focal points at national level, so the usually ministries of social affairs and civil society organizations. This group, the disability platform, will be we believe it will be most likely reviewed when the Commission releases the new phase of the disability strategy. So in autumn, this group may be renewed, and therefore other civil society organizations representing people with disabilities will be able to apply. So this is another entry point important to follow the different developments of the strategy, particularly. Mostly for information, not so much for influencing. Then the Commission also has, and I think Gabriele mentioned it as well, equality coordinators. This, to be honest with you, this doesn't work so well, but it's good to know that in every cabinet member of the cabinets of European commissioners, there is one person responsible for equality. That in principle, normally, should be open to discuss with you. And then there are disability coordinators in all DGs in the Commission. Problem is that we don't know who these people are. And we've been trying the Commission to publish the list of these equality coordinators. Some we know, obviously, but in some DGs, there must be an equality coordinator, but we don't know who that person is. So that has some shortcomings as well. And then also the European Citizens Initiative, I think Gabriele also mentioned, he mentioned this. EDF, we did it, for example, back in 2007, we gathered the 1,300,000 signatures for the Commission to prepare anti-discrimination legislation, and they did the Equal Treatment Directive, but because of the being non-discrimination, this needs unanimity in the Council, so among member states. And unfortunately, even though we managed to get the Commission to propose this legislation, the Council has been blocking it since then. But it is indeed a powerful tool if you manage, but it's also very it's difficult to put important points in the political agenda. Then in the European Parliament, the three committees that are mostly dealing with disability are the EMPOL committee, so Employment and Social Affairs, LIBE committee, which is the one on civil liberties, and the PETI committee, which is the one that receives petitions from citizens or organizations. And here, for example, if you want to put something on the political agenda or to draw the attention of MEPs to a particular matter, even if they cannot do much apart from raising awareness or call the Commission to do something, the petitions committee is a good way to do so. So imagine you want to raise a particular topic that you believe the EU should be active on. Then, for example, a member of us recently launched a petition about lack of accessibility of labels. So it's one of our proposals for the disability strategy to have an initiative on accessibility, on accessible labels. Then, so yeah, feel free to use that at your discretion, individually or as an organization. Then two other entry points in the European Parliament. The most active one, actually thanks to the disability movement, is the Disability Intergroup. This is an informal grouping of MEPs. So basically, we have around 70 or 70 few members of the European Parliament from all committees, in different committees, from all political groups in the parliament, except the very, 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 very extreme right that are not in the intergroup. And even if the intergroup is an informal grouping of MEPs, they coordinate actions of related to the promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities. And the good news is that EDF, we are the secretariat of this intergroup, which again is an informal grouping, but is recognized by the European Parliament. So we can organize meetings. Well, not us, but the MEPs can organize meetings for the intergroup in the European Parliament. So what does the intergroup does? Well, it's a win-win situation because on the one hand, we know, and you can know easily if you go to the Disability Intergroup website, which are the MEPs that are normally more inclined to work with us or more open to work with disability organizations, divided by country and political group and committee as well. So let's say, okay, you want to follow, you're following a legislation or a resolution in the committee of, I don't know, foreign affairs. And then you don't have contacts with the rapporteur and shadow rapporteurs. Then you can check who from the disability intergroup are in that committee, and in principle, those MEPs will be open to support your ideas, or at least to welcome you and listen to you. And for us, it's obviously a great advocacy tool, because when there is an important legislation in the parliament, we alert them and we say, hey, there is the proposal for the disability card coming your way to your committee. Here you have our proposals for amendments. So we distribute our position papers, position papers or proposals for amendment through the disability intergroup as well. And also our members, and you can do so at Cerebral Palsy Europe as well, organize events with members of the disability intergroup. So you can say, hey, imagine you want to organize an event about political participation. You can ask me, Alejandro, who are the MEPs in the intergroup that are active in this topic? And I can tell you this, and that. And then you reach out to them, and then they can propose to the rest of the disability intergroup to have this as a disability intergroup event, and there you go. So yeah, it's a way to some intergroups in the parliament actually have the secretariat inside, but the problem with those is that they lose contact with the civil society organizations. So for example, when an MEP in the intergroup needs information, imagine an MEP wants to write a written question to the commission about people with cerebral palsy, then I will immediately turn that MEP towards you. And I'll say, okay, you need to reach out to our members. Or if they need, you have information about the employment gap of people with disabilities, then we provide that information. So it's a win-win, let's say, for both sides. And lastly, and this one is not so much working, unfortunately, but let's hope that one soon will become more influential. The Parliament did create it kind of like a task force or a network, as they call it, for the CRPD. Basically, you can check there. One MEP per committee, well, 16 committees, not all of them, but 16 committees, which is a high number. They gather and they exchange on how they are mainstreaming the convention in their work. But the problem with this is that the parliament hasn't put resources. So this is not a committee, so they cannot pass legislation or amend legislation. It's kind of like a slightly more formal network than the intergroup, but definitely between us has been less active than the intergroup. Lastly, and very, very shortly, the European Parliament, there is another EU institution, which is advisory. So it's not like it's very much influential, which is the European Economic and Social Committee. And here there is a permanent group on disability that can raise political topics. So you can approach them, and they are the institution representing civil society organizations as well and social partners. So they are great allies, in hearing your concerns and doing, an opinion about it and raise awareness about it. And then lastly, it's not related to advocacy, but there is the EU CRPD monitoring framework, in which you have, EDF, we are there, but you have the Fundamental Rights Agency and the EU Ombudsman and the European Parliament. And this is the body which is, it needs to be reformed, as the CRPD committee stressed, because it's not functioning well in monitoring how the EU is implementing the convention. Is working well, but as separate members, not as a joint framework that is supposed to be. And lastly, two points of resources that are useful. The Eurostat disability database. Eurostat collects data on disability for many fields. And now, or recently, a couple of years ago, I believe, they have gathered all this information into a disability-specific page. So you have all data on disability there, which is very useful when you need, the evidence of, let's say, poverty, access to housing, things like that. You have many data there that you can disaggregate, not by disabilities in all cases, but definitely by countries, by gender, by age, etc. And another database that I would recommend you, which is looking at national policies, is .com. This is more for comparing national disability policies, and is maintained by the group of experts on disability policies that the Commission hires. Okay, moving on, I'll promise to speed up a bit. Then something that we also do very much, the civil society organizations, is to do this kind of joint statements or joint calls or joint press releases and so forth. It's important not to overdo these because, and it's important to do them strategically. So sometimes even doing one-off thing with a partner that is not expected is really powerful. So for example, when users and industry join for a specific topic, the policymakers listen and actually take the into account the recommendations, because okay, they don't need to decide. No, they okay, users and industry, they are in agreement, so we can just agree to whatever they decided. So for example, we have done this for specific cases concerning accessibility, partnering with industry. And then for other things, so is when you want to show, a big support. I believe I put an example in which your logo is there as well. It's important to show, the strength and the number of organizations supporting a specific cause. But again, we shouldn't overdo it. Then going into the political kind of strategies that you can take, it's important to mobilize our constituency when needed. Again, not to do it every now and then. It's not possible either, but we need to save this in important moments. So for example, here, I include the demonstration that we organized in front of the European Parliament about the Accessibility Act, because the rapporteur didn't want to meet with us. He only wanted to meet with us only once for half an hour, so it didn't make any sense. And then the other big gathering that I'm sure some of you may have been there or may have heard about it is the European Parliament of Persons with Disabilities. This we gather, over 700 disability activists in the hemicycle of the European Parliament, and we do it 1 year before the European elections, with the idea, obviously, of adopting our manifesto with our proposals for the candidates in the next mandate. So you need also to plan also timely when it makes sense to do this kind of more constituency-based actions. And then, other communication like materials, leaflets, toolkits, etc., is important. Then concerning raising awareness among the general public, there here's where we use it's important to use personal stories. So for example, for the European elections, we gather specific testimonials of people with disabilities explaining their barriers when they try to exercise their right to vote, or when they are candidates. And here, yes, we obviously gather these again 1 year, let's say, before the European election, or during the campaign of the European elections, because it's when we know this topic gathers or draws more attention. And then also concerning media, something that we've seen, and I think it's important to stress, is that it is important to keep a low number of press releases, meaning the article that you send to journalists. There are some organizations that send press releases every day. That doesn't make any sense. The journalists actually will block you if you do that. So it's important to keep a low level of press releases, and only doing so when you have something to say. And as you know, the journalists do not want press releases that just say, we welcome, we regret, blah, blah. I mean, this you can obviously publish in your website. But if you send a press release, it's because, journalists, they want to hear conflict. They want a scoop. They want, the personal story behind. Or when you have released an important publication. So, for example, recently we published the Human Rights Report on passengers' rights. And there we were showing that some airlines actually are in breach of EU law, or basically interpret it as they wish. And therefore, that was really appealing for the media, because they can say, oh, the airline in Malta is not complying with EU legislation. I'm gonna, according to this disability organization, I'm gonna get a quote from them. I'm gonna get a quote from the Commission, and there they have a story. So that's why it's important to keep the level of press releases to not too low number, let's say. And use easy language. Sometimes, some press releases to media, they are really long articles that the journalist will not read. So it's important to use an easy language as well, also for accessibility reasons, basically. And then social media. Here, I'm not the best to talk about social media because I'm quitting social media. Yeah. Here I include an example we used when Brussels was full of scooters blocking the way. Anyways, now it's kind of solved, kind of. But anyways, for social media, it's another good way to mobilize constituency, as you know, to attract the media, basically to call for the attention of media. For example, this was the case of the scooters in Brussels, because they were really blocking everything, and some media picked it up when we complained about it. It was also a way to draw the attention of policymakers that are really into social media as well. And also we used it as a way to digest information. So here included a link that you can check, but long report that you can just summarize in a LinkedIn post or in a tweet. That facilitates that that more people will at least read your link, your tweet, sorry, and get the overall idea. And some of them may also click. But if you just tweet with the link to the report, even if you have a nice title of the report, not many people will get the message. And then something that our colleagues from comms tell us all the time is that the personal accounts work better than the institutional ones. So usually, if our executive director sends a post on LinkedIn, that will work better than the post of EDF as organization, for example. I mean, not all the time, but usually personal accounts work better. Or this is what our colleagues tell us. And to conclude, some considerations, well, more than considerations, are perceptions that I can share with you after my experience in the EU policy making process, and what we call the EU bubble, is that it really you really feel a difference on how the three main EU institutions how you deal with the three EU institutions. With the Commission, it's a very kind of I would say technical cooperation. You have people that are really engaged and do really want to do things. You also have some people that maybe are not so interested because the Commission is huge. But again, with the Commission, it's important to be active and to be active in the preparation of the initiatives. And then if you want to put something in their political agenda, you need to go through other means. Either you go to the top, to the political level. So, the president of the Commission and the European commissioners, which is, it's a difficult level to reach. Or, you need, or to go through the citizens initiative, or you go through the parliament. I will get into the parliament in a moment, but with the Commission, what really works is, to provide them with the information they need in order to understand a problem and be active about it. So really to come with the data, with the evidence, with the case studies, with the research, with the personal stories, but, not overwhelmingly political, but really, okay, here's the situation. With the European Parliament, and then when the process starts, really to be active in particularly as Gabriele mentioned, in the preparation, so before the legislation is out. And then with the European Parliament, this is our closest EU institutions. This is the one that will open the doors to you and will be really happy to meet you. It's true that now is a bit different. We have a kind of like a quite far right. The parliament is moving towards the right. Um, but nevertheless, they are fortunately disability is not very partisan, so they are not so political. So many political adversaries when it comes to disability rights, and the parliament, the MEPs are really open. Normally to meet with disability organizations, to meet with people with disabilities, and to bring their voices to the parliament and so forth, and to to take on board suggestions and again, as I said before, is because also their job is at stake every 5 years. So it's definitely the one that you need to rely on, and the one that actually takes into their position most of what we propose. But then the Council of the EU, which is the one that is representing member states, there is when it's more difficult because it's not so transparent. And as Gabriel mentioned, okay, you can meet with the attaches, so these public servants of member states that are developing, are discussing and negotiating the council position at a technical level. But then, if with what you are requiring is something political, you will need to go through the national organization. So this is why, for example, in EDF, when there is an important file, let's say the next EU budget, we prepare template letters for our members to translate into their national language and send to the ministries, because at the end of the day, the attaché will receive the political guidance on our direction from the capital. So sometimes it's very difficult to understand what is going on in the council. Sometimes it's difficult to find the contact details of those attachés. So what we do for important files is really to go through our national members. So we say, okay, there is this legislation. You need to reach out to your ministry, and this is the position, or these are our proposals. So this is all what I wanted to say. I hope it was not too boring, not too long, and happy to answer any question if you have.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. So any questions or comments from participants? I think I'd like to come back to a couple of the points that you mentioned and really underline these looking as we go forward. One is that question of competences and understanding the competences for different policy areas, that some things are decided at EU level, some things are decided at national level. Sometimes it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
But I remember when we were preparing the review of the European Union's implementation of the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities last year, one of the things that the UN committee actually said to us was that, that they're always hearing these arguments about competences.
Yeah.
So competences can be used in a way where, for example, if the EU doesn't want to do something, then it says it doesn't have competence for it,
Yeah.
or if it wants to pass the buck to somebody else.
Mm.
So it's always very important for us to understand exactly what the competences are and not to take no for an answer, because
Exactly.
the EU can do things. It may not be able to adopt legislation on an issue, but it has funding programs that have a big influence on the way in which different policy areas are developed. It can encourage that harmonization you were talking to just by sharing best practice, by comparing
Exactly. Yeah.
one country to another. So as we go through the different topics that we're going to be addressing in the different webinars and workshops that we're doing, we have to keep this in mind. What exactly are the competencies, and how can they be used to affect change. And then another point you were saying was how it's important to look at topics that we don't immediately think are being relevant for disability rights. So you mentioned the internal market as being a key one, and one of our uh, one of our workshops will be looking at the freedom of movement, which is one of the key four freedoms, the basic pillars of European integration, and um, uh, and to see perhaps in other areas how those principles are being used to um, to bring down barriers or discrimination to different people by taking simply the principle of non-discrimination on the grounds of nationality as being one way that you can open up access to rights in a country which you didn't previously have.
Mm.
Um, but then another topic that we've been engaging in more over the last few months has been housing, for example, because the European Commission has made housing a priority. And so obviously accessibility is an issue for us, um, affordability as well, of course. But uh, instead of waiting for there to be a proposal on accessible housing, we go into all of these public consultations on different aspects of housing policy in general and keep hammering home our message about accessibility. You have to remember accessibility and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah.
So any other remarks? Well, thank you again so much, Alejandro.
No,
Really,
happy.
again, very, very thorough um, insights and lots of tips there, lots of useful references, which we're not going to find in textbooks. That's come from your knowledge and expertise of doing this day in, day out. And that will be really very, very useful for us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I hope it was useful. And yes, as you said, John, I mean, we need to understand how the system is complicated, but we need to understand the system and not taking a no for an answer immediately. So we'll always, when there is a, how is it? When there is a will, there is a way. So we'll find a way. So I'll share my presentation with you, John, and you can distribute it to the participants. And many thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Thanks.
Take care.
All the best. Thank you.